the recording.
Okay, it looks like you're ready to go.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks to everybody for joining us for today's webinar. And just a note for those who are joining that we are recording this and we'll be posting it on our web page and on YouTube, so that folks who aren't able to join us today will have access to this information. So the purpose of this webinar is to provide an overview of the 2024 OAHP Working Lands Conservation Covenant and Easement application cycle, which this is a cycle that has just recently opened, and applications are going to be due on June 28th at 5 p.m. And so there'll be lots of opportunities to engage with staff as we go through the solicitation. This is one of them. And Robin will be talking a little bit more about that later in the webinar. But just to do some introductions, my name is Taylor Larson. I'm the coordinator for the Agricultural Heritage Program, and I'm joined by Robin Meacher, who is the Conservation Easement Specialist with the Ag Heritage Program. And Robin will be doing a lot of the meaty content, and I will be here to support and kind of do some facilitation. So yeah, so how this is going to work is we're going to kind of just briefly root ourselves in the history and purpose of the OAHP program, talk a little bit about the covenant and easement grant offering, and then make sure that folks are familiar with how to access the application tools and walk through the application process and timeline. And then at the end of going through that information, we'll take questions from webinar participants. And questions, you can either put them into the Q&A. You're welcome to do that as we go through the webinar, or you can save them to the end. Or you can also raise your hand at the end of the presentation. We can unmute you and you can ask your question using your voice instead of your keyboard. So with that, I think we can probably just go ahead and get started. So Robin, if you go to the next slide, we'll just talk briefly about the purpose of the program as a whole. So the Covenant and Easement grant program is one of 4 grant programs that are part of the Ag Heritage Program. And that's the one we'll be talking about today. But the larger program itself has kind of these three pillars that form our purpose. So it's to increase the economic viability of Oregon's agricultural operations and the larger economic sector, while at the same time enhancing fish and wildlife habitat, water quality, or other natural resources on Oregon's working land. And then while we're achieving those 2 purposes, we work to reduce conversion and fragmentation of that working land as well. So all of our grant programs, and including obviously this one, are rooted in that purpose. So just at a high level, just, history of the program, bringing us up to where we are today. The program was established way back in 2017, and the commission, who oversees the program, worked really hard in 2018 to draft an initial rule set and stand up the program. And they put a little bit of money initially in 2019 towards doing a feasibility assessment for how we go about valuing certain agricultural practices, and that's actually for another grant program that we're not talking much about today. And then in 2022, the program received its first slug of funding, $5 million, and a large portion of that was invested in the Conservation Covenant and Easement Program. And we're currently working with those grantees on implementing their projects. And those projects were awarded in 2023. And so now in 2024, we've recently received additional funding, and the commission and the OWEB board have put into their spending plan money to fund this existing cycle that we're going to be talking about for the Covenant and Easement Program. And so with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Robin to talk about some of the details of the solicitation.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. So as Taylor said, I'm Robin Meacher. I am the Conservation Easement Specialist for the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. And we wanted to kind of start folks off high level, talking through the program or the grant offering for the conservation covenants and easements at a high level, and then we'll go more in depth about the application process and the cycle that we just launched last week. So similar to the overall Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program, the Working Land Conservation Covenant and Easements Grant offering has kind of two primary purposes, and those are to preserve and protect farm and ranch lands, as well as maintaining or enhancing fish and wildlife habitat, water quality, and other natural resource values on the land. And so for this grant offering, talking a little bit about the high-level eligibility considerations for the projects that are considering applying for funding in this grant type. So first, we have eligible applicants. And so these are the types of entities that are eligible to apply for the grants for the grant offering. This is limited to a holder as defined in Oregon Revised Statute 271-715, which I'm not going to go into significant detail here, but essentially those are entities like soil and water conservation districts, land trusts, or other nonprofits that have a mission of conserving and protecting land for conservation, as well as Indian tribes. While state agencies are included in the statutory definition, they are excluded from eligibility in the program by rule. And then also a consideration around the types of properties that can be part of a working lands conservation covenant or easement project. We do have certain eligibility requirements there, and those are properties that are actively used by an agricultural owner or operator for an agricultural operation that includes, but need not be limited to, active engagement in farming or ranching. So these are the types of things that, as Taylor mentioned, like we as staff are willing to and will be engaging with folks who are considering bringing projects into the program as much as needed to kind of help sort through these eligibility questions, eligible properties, eligible project types, and all that. So kind of high level eligible uses of the grant fund. So this program does cover the purchase price of the property interest. So that's either a conservation covenant or a conservation easement. And I'll talk a little bit about the differentiation between those two in a moment. So it'll cover the purchase price of that. And then there's other typical project costs, such as staff costs, management plan development, due diligence activities, baseline documentation development, legal fees, closing costs, and then some stewardship funding is also part of the eligible uses of grant funds. So those factor in when you're building your budget. And we, again, can help kind of talk through those, what types of activities would fall under those eligible uses of grant funds. And so for our 20 working lands, the conservation covenant and easements, so those are both the eligible property interests. A covenant is for a term of 20 to 50 years in the program. And then a conservation easement is defined as lasting in perpetuity for the purposes of this program. We do require at least 25% match funding, and that's toward the OWEB project cost. And then applications that come in are reviewed by staff. They are then recommended by the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission, and they are awarded by the OWEB board. So there's a couple different levels of review, evaluation, and then recommendation before we get to a final board award. So for this cycle, as Taylor said, our 2024 application cycle is now open. Applications are due on June 28th by 5 p.m. And we do want to stress, and probably won't stress enough throughout this webinar, that we will be engaging with potential applicants throughout the open window in a variety of ways. We will be offering pre-application consultations, which I'll go into a little bit more, a little bit further on into this, but those are essentially just an opportunity to talk one-on-one with us about specific projects that you're considering bringing in, and we can kind of talk through all the different parts of the program and how it might be a good fit. And then we will be tracking open application in OWEB's online grant management system. So that's something we'll be doing on our end just to see how people are engaging and as we get further into the cycle, if we're seeing any issues with people entering details into the system, and then trying to make sure that folks are continuing to be aware of the application deadline. And to that, we are encouraging folks to submit their final applications in the system 3 days prior to the actual application deadline. We have a variety of technical services that we use at OWEB and an online system that we rely on the assistance of others to try and work through. So if there's any issues with any uploads or any other tech things that might come at the time of submission, it would be really helpful and for us to be able to work through those before we get to the application deadline. So it's an encouragement. We're hoping that all of the touch points throughout the open window will also be a way to kind of make sure that folks don't come into any last minute issues as they're trying to submit their applications. To that point, applications have to be submitted through our online grant management system, or OGMIS, and we'll go into kind of how to access that in a little bit here. And for this cycle, we have a total of $4,541,680 available in the Working Land Conservation Covenant and Easement Grant offering. So going a little bit into detail about what the application and the process looks like for 2024. We did make a number of adjustments to the application process based off of the lessons learned from the launch of our first grant offering back in 2022. Most of this feedback and the adjustments we made were primarily informed by our own experience as staff working with applicants and then with grantees now through the process, feedback from the applicants, from our technical reviewers, and feedback from the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission itself, which all provided really valuable insight into the adjustments that could make the process work better for everyone. And then in 2023, we also walked through the proposed adjustments to the application with the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission Application and Process Committee, which was a committee that the Commission established at their March 2023 meeting that included a subset of Commission members as well as representatives from the Coalition of Oregon Land Trust and the Executive Director of the Oregon Agricultural Trust. And after that feedback loop, OWEB staff did make further refinements to the program expectations and to the application to prepare for the launch of a future solicitation cycle, which is what we are in now. So that feedback's reflected in our application. We're going to get a little bit into kind of how to navigate our website and get to the relevant materials for the application now online. So we do have the Oregon Agricultural Heritage website, and from here you can access our online grant management system, or OGMIS. So from the website, you'll just click on Apply for Grants Online, and that will provide you with a drop-down, which will show you how to obtain a login, which you will need in order to actually get into the system and start working up an application. But you can also click on Online Application here, and that will take you over to our OGMIS kind of landing page. And the landing page has a host of information you can access without the login. But again, you'll need to have that login to actually get in and create an application in the system. Applications will only be accepted when input through the online system. So we just want to make people understand that even though we're going to be talking about some of the tools you can use prior to submitting, we can only accept applications through OGMIS. And one of the items that's probably the most helpful on this landing page is accessing the application templates. So the template is provided as a resource for potential applicants to work through the application prior to working through the application in the system. So you can answer your questions in this Word document, kind of work through them, and then copy paste them and put them into the system itself. The template won't be accepted as the application, but it's a nice tool to kind of work through your answers prior to going into the online system. And we do really encourage you to use the template for that purpose, but also take some time to familiarize yourself with the online system, because while the Word document and the template works that way. There is kind of text boxes, check boxes, and other features in the actual system that are good to just familiarize yourself with as you're going through as well. So to access the template, there's the nice template tab at the top. You just click on that, and that will take you to a list of all the application templates you can find for OWeb applications. And so you'll want to scroll down and you'll eventually find, and these do kind of change throughout time. So you're going to be looking specifically for the Oregon Agricultural OAHP Conservation Covenants and Easements. We do want to point out that at the time of this webinar, we are working with tech services to remove the one right beneath because we recognize that's very confusing. And hopefully we'll have that removed from the system to avoid that confusion, but it's something that we're still in the process of working on. So once you find the application you're looking for, you can hit generate on the OAHP Conservation Covenants and Easements template. That will take you to, essentially it'll download the template Word document for you. And we do want to acknowledge that at first glance, when you see this application, for those of you that might have engaged with the previous application cycle, we know that this one might look significantly longer. And for the 2024 solicitation, we took the approach of attempting to ask more directly to applicants about the information expected by staff, the review team, and the commission. So while it might appear daunting at first glance with this application, our intent really is to ensure that applicants are provided with questions directly requesting information for us to directly address the evaluation criteria, and we chose to take a splitting rather than a lumping approach to the questions we're asking. This really is an approach that is attempting to standardize the type of information we receive from applicants in order to have more parity across all application reviews. So using the template, again, this is a Word document that's generated. It has all application questions, and you'll see that there are under questions, if they have them, there's certain guidance language. So that is guidance associated with the question, and it'll appear as italicized text underneath the question itself. When you're working in the actual application in OGMIS, that guidance text will be what corresponds with the text that's included in this nice little I button, which is the little blue circle, if you can't see that, with the I in it. And once you click on that, that same guidance text will come up as a pop-up box. So a little bit different in how it looks in the template, but it's the same text that is operating as guidance when you click on that I buttons. So we do encourage you to use these I buttons. There's a lot of good information in there as to what we're looking for in the application questions. And then there's additional guidance that's located in our program manual, which I will touch on a little bit later. And then also want to call special attention to the project materials checklist because yes, we see that this at first looks like a really long list. If you look at it more closely, you'll see that there are some items that are requested only if present at the time of the application, but we wanted to make sure that we provided a full list of what project materials are relevant and are spoken to within the application itself, so that when you get to the end, towards the end of your application, you have something to look at to see, did I supply everything that was asked for that I have? Some items are required, and those are spoken of within the application, and it's noted when they are required. We've also provided some clear expectations on the type of maps we expect from all applicants at the time of application, and so that's another reason why this list looks long. And again, this is with the interest of increasing parity across reviews. With each project material, you'll see that it's accompanied by the upload type to select when uploading your documents into the system. This is something within the OGMIS system itself where each image has to have a document type associated with it, and we are limited with the options of the realm of what type of image types can be chosen. So we did our best to make sure that we provided as much guidance on what type of image type to select. But of course, working through the system, if you have any issues on that as you're going through it, always reach out to us and we'll do what we can to try and sort that out with you. For each one of these project materials, there is additional corresponding guidance in the program manual as well. So to access some of the guidance and templates and forms that are listed as program materials, you can also find that on the OAHP website as well. So starting kind of from the text on the screen under the conservation covenants and easements grant offering, you'll scroll down to that and you'll see underneath we have a link for our program administration manual. So this has all of our program guidance contained in one nice PDF. The PDF does have a linked table of contents to help you move around the document more easily. However, we do recommend that you read through the entire manual. Some material, as you see on this page right here, is background. It's nice to ground yourself in if you're not overly familiar with the program. Also, if you are, to just remind yourself of what the program purpose and what our processes are. And the guidance also does have, or the manual has guidance on expectations regarding the materials in the application, as well as guidance on our application review process and the post-award expectations. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail about what's in the manual itself, but once you have an opportunity to work through it on your own, please reach out to us with any questions if you need additional clarification on anything in the program manual itself. So the manual does refer to other forms and application worksheets, as well as the application states when these things are required. So you can find these also on the website easily by just clicking on the forms and applications worksheets, which once you click on it, it will provide you with the drop-down, and these will all be downloadable materials that you can work through. And then if any of them, there is corresponding guidance within the program manual as well to describe what each one of these forms and worksheets does, as well as what the examples and templates do. So a little bit more about what our applications are looking for. So overall, the application is designed to collect a base level of information about the project that will help reviewers understand the level of readiness, as well as the consistency of the proposed project with OAHP's dual purposes and the evaluation criteria. The types of information the application asks for are specifics on the natural resource and agricultural conservation values. So ask questions such as the soils and habitats that may be present on the property, their acreages, quality, and distribution across the landscape. Goes into questions about the transaction details, so the proposed easement or covenant terms, expected purchase price, and the evidence supporting that purchase price, realty information, including your title information, access to the property, minerals, and any boundary considerations. We do ask about management implications. So this is an opportunity to kind of reflect on whether land management will change as a result of the easement or covenant, and the landowner management actions that might be needed to maintain compatibility of the uses of the property with the conservation values as they're presented in the application. So those are coming forward as questions that we're asking in the application itself. And then the criteria, as well as the need for technical review that we talk about and go through for the project, is outlined in both OAHP statute and the administrative rules that guide the administration of the program. Both of these can be found on the OAHP website. So as you're working through your application, again, we've done our best to provide helpful guidance and tips as to what specifically we're looking for in our application questions. But it's always great to refer back to the evaluation criteria in rule and work through that if needed as well. And then our evaluation process involves this technical review, which is provided by agricultural, natural resource, and due diligence experts. We utilize the knowledge of our professionals, ag and natural resource professionals, in the areas where our applications are located to evaluate and rank the applications. We use some statewide experts as well, like land use experts. And this process is prescribed in rule, but it also is a practical recognition of the wealth of knowledge throughout the natural resource and agricultural community. And so we're really grateful to those that participate in that and help us bring forward great evaluations to our commission. Overall, the timeline from application to award is approximately 6 months. And so that timeline has already started, like we said. It began on May 6th when we opened the applications in August. We will be doing pre-application consultations pretty much any time until applications are due. We do strongly encourage any entity considering submitting an application to reach out and schedule these with OAHP staff kind of as soon as you can. Even if you did participate in the program and submitted an application or were working up an application last time, things have changed. So please don't hesitate to reach out and schedule a consultation so we can talk through your projects. These meetings are for discussing the specifics of your proposed project and then giving you an opportunity to ask any questions about the application, the process, and then any expectations that come with an award if the board does award the project funding. They're not only a way to encourage and engage with OAHP staff as you develop the application. We, of course, are available for kind of any question that comes up. You don't have to have the consultation only, but we do want folks to know that we are happy to have that kind of concrete time set aside to go specifically into your projects and talk about them a little bit more in depth. So feel free to reach out to us as needed with questions regarding really any aspect of the program, technical issues with the application as you're working through OGMIS, specifics on any certain program materials or other requirements. Really any questions you have, feel free to reach out to us anytime. Applications are due June 28th by 5 p.m. Again, please try and consider submitting early so that if there are any technical issues, we can address them before the application deadline. And then once applications are received, OAHP staff will review and work with our technical review team to evaluate the applications and develop evaluations and rankings to then present to the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission. So OAHP staff will be doing site visits prior to finalizing evaluations. So please be prepared when you're submitting an application to work with OAHP during July and September to host a visit on your project site. And so the site visits and application evaluations at the staff level will kind of be happening all around the same time, July through September. And then we'll be working with the technical review team through kind of October time frame to finalize our evaluations. And evaluations and those final rankings from staff will be presented to the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission at the meeting that we currently have scheduled for November of 2024. And then once the commission reviews the projects, it will develop a funding recommendation that staff will then present at the OAHP board meeting in January of 2025, where funding awards will be considered. And a few more things to note about the funding awards and project expectations if an application is awarded funding. The awards are conditional. Grantees must meet a certain standard and project-specific conditions prior to the distribution of funds. We do talk with applicants prior to making a recommendation of funding if there are going to be any project-specific conditions that we're considering putting on the award, just to make sure that they align with what the applicant thinks they are able to do and their landowner is able to do. So we do have that conversation prior to putting together the recommendation to the commission and ultimately the board. And then once a award is made, we do have typical due diligence actions that are required. So this is your project appraisal, your environmental site assessments, your title work, and all these actions are reviewed and then approved by OAHP. We do require management plans to be developed and approved by OWEB prior to closing. We're not going to go into depth about management plans today. There is quite a bit of information in the program manual about our expectations and requirements with management plans, and that is something that we are, again, happy to talk more in depth about how it relates to your specific project in a pre-application consultation. And then there is an 18-month from board award to project completion expectation for all projects. And with that, I think, Taylor, I don't know if you want to go into the Q&As that are in the chat. I can't see them. Or if we want to just...
I can facilitate questions. So
okay, great.
Yeah, folks have them. Please feel free to type them in the chat or raise your hand and I will unmute you and allow you to ask your question directly. But we do have a couple of questions from Ellen in the chat that we'll start with. So the first one is a cultural review required?
Cultural review, what, I guess I'd like more kind of specifics on that question. Currently, so from the evaluation consideration, we do not have any evaluation criteria that speak specifically to cultural resources being part of the evaluation of a project. And then Taylor, maybe you can talk about how we share all our project applications through our tribal liaison.
Yeah, so we do, once we receive the applications, we work to make sure that all the federally recognized tribes in Oregon are aware of the applications that we're considering and have an opportunity to provide input on those applications. But we don't receive federal money to run the program, so we aren't subject to the specific rules that come along with federal funding around cultural review. So that's why our process may look a little different. But Ellen, if you have additional questions on that, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you at some point. But Ellen does have a second question. And she was asking for an example of match. What would be examples of match for?
Yeah, great question. So match can come from other public or private dollars. So most of our projects that came in through the last cycle used a Natural Resource Conservation Service program, the Agricultural Conservation Easement, Agricultural Land Easement programs funding to match. And so those dollars from NRCS were specifically towards the purchase price, and they came with their own requirements. We also had another applicant and grantee who used another federal program, which was through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. That program contributed funds that were both for the purchase price of the conservation easement as well as some due diligence funding. We had other projects that were brought in private match. So that was either contributions from foundations that were supporting the project or from other private sources, the landowner as a potential donation of part of the project as well. So there's a variety of sources. We do have quite a bit of other guidance related to what can qualify as match in our program manual that lists out what can qualify in rule. And then also in our budget guidance, which is the Go Big document, which can be accessed both from the Oregon Ag Heritage Program website as well as from the program manual itself.
Great. Other questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. I'll linger here awkwardly for at least another 30 seconds before we end the webinar. So get your questions in. And otherwise, like Robin mentioned, I mean, there'll be lots of opportunities to connect with us between now and June 28th. So don't hesitate to reach out with questions as they come up. And of course, schedule a pre-app consultation if you're considering putting in an application. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, question time is over. So thanks everybody for joining us for this this webinar, and thanks to Robin for providing the bulk of the information. And like I mentioned at the top, this webinar will be available for viewing on our webpage as well as the OWeb YouTube channel. So check it out, and again, reach out with any questions, or if you have trouble accessing this webinar later, we're happy to point you in the right direction. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll talk to many of you soon.